sometimes wonder what those birds think when they're flying around up there and they see the drone. They must think it's the biggest wasp they've ever seen. But, we see them from time to time. Hawks, vultures up there near the drone altitude. I do like looking at the sky because that tells us a little bit about what's going on, and we can kind of visualize that on the skew-t. And here's an example. This corresponds to the footage that you saw earlier. Shows that there's that frontal inversion right overhead. You can see the cloud layers there at about 1 to 2,000 between the 1,000 and 850 millibar level. And if you look at the wind plots over on the right, that's indicating that difference in the air mass. Down below the inversion, light northeast winds, and above that, southwesterly flow. Here's what's happening across the country this afternoon. Pretty strong front moving southward through the southeast U.S. and Texas. And we're going to put the frontal boundary somewhat like this. The winds have definitely picked up out of the northeast across Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, bringing 40s and 50s down to the Red River Valley and pushing that front against the front range of the Rockies down into the Davis Mountains of West Texas. Another strong front up in Idaho and Oregon, getting some cold temperatures up there in the high deserts of Oregon. And then down in California, I know from yesterday there should be a front hanging around that area, but looking at this map, I don't really have a sense where it is. And we got another big system there in California. This is definitely an upper level low in this area. Not too sure where the surface systems are, but it's a very good bet the cold front is going to be somewhere in this area. Not sure about the Bear Clinic low or the warm front, but as a first guess, we could probably say it's something like that right there. You can see the Sierra Nevada is really getting that precip. Probably a lot of snow showers going on out around the Lake Tahoe area. And if you remember the Donner Party saga from the 19th century, this is probably the kind of pattern that kept them snowed in there. These Pacific systems sweeping inland and really hammering the Sierra Nevada range. Offshore, you can see all that cold air advection cumulus working southward. Shallow, unstable cumulus fields moving south as that very cold air rides over the relatively warmer ocean. Pacific Northwest, pretty nice day, although probably kind of a brisk northerly wind in some areas. You can see fog underneath the high clouds. There's that fog. And it's kind of surprising to see all that fog east of the Cascades, but that does happen from time to time with very strong cold systems. And with that southerly flow riding over the top of that cold front, that may keep the clouds kind of locked in there for a while. In the northern plains, we've got that humid easterly flow working westward and developing into a little bit of an upslope pattern. A lot of that low cloud is in this area right here, and on top of it you can see the bands of cirrus downstream from that trough moving across. Also showing some pretty good stratus and fog in the higher terrain of Montana, right in this area here. And that's an indication that we've got cold air up in this area, and I'm going to put an H because that's probably some strong ridging moving into that area. And we've figured the front is probably somewhat like that right there. So as you go north from Denver towards Laramie and Billings, probably quite a change in the weather. The south central U.S. is pretty unsettled. A lot of cloud originating from both the low levels where we have overrunning isentropic lift going on, and as well we've got layers of cirrus moving from southwest to northeast due to the approach of the upper level dynamics. So two different things going on there, and closer to the dynamics we've got storms going up in southwest Texas. We can get in there and take a look at those storms there in Fort Stockton. Might help to have some interstates on there. But yeah, there it is, approaching the city as we record this. Pretty good anvil. I kind of wonder if anybody is even down there. That's definitely on the edge of most of the chase territory we're all familiar with. Pretty nice day in the southeastern U.S. Very warm along the Gulf Coast where we've got 80s and very muggy conditions. But if you get north of that front, and you can certainly see it right there, you get into the cooler air, and it's just kind of a partly to mostly cloudy day in places like Atlanta, Birmingham, and Chattanooga. And also a really nice weekend in the northeast U.S. You can see a lot of those frozen lakes there in Ontario and Quebec. Cumulus fields moving north to south. That's modification of the air mass. Little instability there. And as you go north, you get into the drier air, so you don't really release that instability. But that air mass modification is definitely continuing. And I guess we don't talk much about Canada, but why not look at British Columbia and Alberta? Got some strong northerly flow. Can't see the low levels because most of what we have here looks like snow cover and frozen lakes. But above that, bands of cirrus working from north to south, indicating we've got northwesterly flow aloft. And that's going to be bringing down cooler air. Out in British Columbia, it looks like they've had some really good snows. The Pacific Ranges and Banff National Park looks pretty white there. Moving over to Saskatchewan and Manitoba, northwesterly flow again, and boy, it looks cold. A lot of frozen lakes there, and they've had kind of a brutal winter this year. And as you go to the south, you can see some snow cover underneath the clouds. Very easy to pick out because it doesn't move. Now, that can sometimes be fog, but in this case, this time of year, that's more likely, especially being that extensive, that's likely to be snow. And then Quebec, I'm still looking for that one viewer that must be there, but yeah, it looks very frozen there. You can see Manicouagan Reservoir, the little ring right there. Stands out very well. And then in the Canadian Maritimes out there, looks like some really fast, unstable flow. Looks like a good punch of cold air working southward along the Labrador Current. So we're seeing those bands of cumulus, unstable air moving southward. So let's put it together. For tonight, weather across much of the eastern U.S. is going to be dominated by this 1042 millibar high centered over Quebec. No wonder it's so clear there. And that means that we're going to have northerly flow across much of the country. There's that northeast flow pushing all the way to Texas. And then as it recurves and moves up into the higher plains, we get that upslope flow, which is helping the cloudiness to persist in that area right there. Up to the north, we pick up a lot of noise from the mountains. But if we look at the difference between this high pressure, 1028 to 1032 millibars up in that area, versus the 1014, 1016 readings down in southern Wyoming, we can pick out the front right there in Wyoming. And it looks like some more of it extends into Oregon. So that matches up pretty well with what we had on the surface chart. And then the other system down there in California like that. For tomorrow, looking at the pressure patterns, dominated by this huge region of high pressure. Goes from 1036 millibar high over the Canadian Maritimes, extends as a ridge into the Virginia area, all the way into the Ohio Valley. See, there's another high right there, and then that connects up to another high in Montana. So that bubble high will keep a lot of the country kind of cleared out. Not going to have very many fronts in there. What fronts that we do have, well, it looks like that little system that we looked at on the satellite is sweeping southeastward into the Great Lakes area. So it's probably going to be a little bit unsettled there in Michigan and Wisconsin. Other fronts, well, down in Texas, that other front will be hanging across West Texas like that. In Wyoming, looks like cold front pushes south into the I-70 corridor. And then out west, looks like that cold front in California has made some headway, moving through the Los Angeles area into Tonopah and Winnemucca. And behind it, Due to that anti-front setup, we've got a lot of precip behind the cold front, and as you go further west, you get into that cold core low, which is located right in this area. That's the cold core low. So in between the front and the cold core low, good chance of showery weather, especially during the daytime when we add in heating. For Tuesday night, we still get cold air banked up against the higher terrain of Texas and Colorado and touching into eastern Wyoming. Looks like that front in Wyoming, the east-west one, looks like that's receded northward, probably as a warm front. And the front in California has made some headway. Looks like that's moved all the way into Arizona. So there's the location of that front. And behind it, the cold core low now moving inland across the San Francisco, San Jose area. In between, some showery weather during the daytime. And it looks like we have enough upslope flow and isentropic lift to get elevated storms going in the Texas Panhandle. Things start getting pretty stormy for Wednesday night. Frontal system crossing the Rockies there, moving into eastern New Mexico, and you can see that the cold core low has advanced into Arizona. So we're going to see things start to improve in California, but it still will be a little bit on the cool side in that area. The Gulf is definitely wide open. You can see that to the south. Good gradient coming onshore, and that's going to bring up the moisture into Texas and help feed those storms in West Texas. Also looks like the warm front will be lifting up into the Ohio River Valley, so probably a chance of storms during the day on Wednesday, anywhere from Illinois into Ohio. I haven't looked at the potential for severe weather, but pattern-wise, this is where I would expect maybe some watch boxes to go up. So we'll look at that more closely as we get into the work week. For Thursday, very dynamic pattern in the Central Plains as we get a deep 987 millibar low spinning up there in Nebraska. Strong overrunning and upslope on the high plains. We'll get snow showers going all the way from Minnesota into western Nebraska. Warm front will continue lifting north, so we'll see storms anywhere from Michigan to Ohio, and possibly more storms developing in Illinois. I don't know, again, I haven't looked at the instability, but this is a very similar pattern to the April 3rd, 1974 super outbreak. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, although things do look pretty shared here. So I would expect if there's enough moisture and the thermodynamics work out, we could see severe weather east of the Mississippi River Valley on Thursday. So that'll be something to watch. And the cold core low moving in past the Great Basin area. It's right there in Ohio, or it's right there in Utah. For Friday, everything moves eastward. Looks like most of the action shifts into New Brunswick. Looks like a cold air advection trough moving through Indiana and Illinois, bringing a chance of snow showers there to the Chicago area. And in behind it, 1040 millibar high, moving southeast and bringing a new shot of cold air to much of the U.S. east of the Rockies. But looks like a new system coming into Oregon and California. That's moving quickly southeastward, and that'll be our next weather maker. For Saturday, it's going to look something like this. Cold air is mostly covering the eastern U.S. and not seeing much development on that system there in Nevada and Utah. Looks like that moves quickly southeastward, kind of as an upper-level system. And we see height falls across much of California, and that'll be enough to destabilize things further and get some showers going in that area. And then for Sunday, it's still kind of hard to pick out exactly what's going on there in California. Looks like new development back there. Can still see some baroclinicity in Northern California. So we would probably want to watch that area for the next system coming together. And that 1047 millibar high, very strong there over Quebec. Giant bubble covering much of the U.S., and that'll keep Texas and Oklahoma in an overrunning type pattern. And in fact, I might want to adjust that a little bit. That looks kind of like a front to me. Not so sure about it, but I think it may look a little something like that there. See, there's not much of a thickness gradient south of that warm front, but you get north of there, yeah, there's a very strong thickness gradient. So I think that indicates a frontal system and maybe a chance for severe weather in Louisiana and East Texas for Sunday next week. And that's about all I have for tonight. And for our weather questions segments, I've got a letter here from Michael Gonzalez asking about the San Joaquin Valley, California, snow being very rare there. And if you look at similar elevations in the eastern U.S., it's pretty easy to get snow. So what's up with that? Well, the big problem is if you look at the terrain. Well, a big problem with the San Joaquin Valley is blocking by the mountains. Mountains are very, very effective at blocking cold air, and that only gives you a few regions where it can sneak in, like through the passes there in Northern California. That's usually how it gets in. And other than that, yeah, there's a big barrier there. Now, you can develop cold air, either from advecting in from the Pacific, but it's been modified by the ocean pretty strongly. Also, you can get dynamic cooling. That could be from an approaching upper-level system lifting the air mass and cooling it dry adiabatically, or evaporation of precip as it falls, and you get wet bulbing. That's another method, but it really helps to have that cold Canadian air moving in, and that's the reason in the eastern U.S., not a problem. Yeah, there's the corresponding central U.S. map. It's pretty much flat all the way up to the polar ice cap. So there's really nothing to prevent that cold air coming southward. Now, you also asked about the 540 decameter thickness line being a threshold for snow. It definitely works in the central and eastern U.S., but not so well in California. And the reason for that is thickness is a combination of the lower level and the mid-level temperature. So if we get 540 in the Central Plains, usually it's because there's very frigid low-level temperatures, with Canada being so close up there. However, in the western U.S., we can get some incredibly intense upper-level systems. Like this is today. This is a really good example. See that right there? We've got minus 40 temperatures aloft at 500 millibars. Well, not quite minus 40, but very close. And so that really gives your main contribution being from the upper levels. So even if we're 40 degrees in the low levels, having minus 34 aloft at 500, that can really bias your thickness downward. Yeah, there it is, the 540 line cutting straight through the Stockton area, but north of that, lots of rain. So if anybody else has questions, feel free to send those in. There's the address. And we'll try to read those on the air and get you some answers. Also, feel free to let me know how you're doing with the pandemic and all these shortages. Maybe we can chat briefly about that tomorrow. So I hope you all have a good rest of your weekend, and I wish you the best for the upcoming week. Hopefully there won't be too many surprises, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.